I'm not going to be one of those people who cries about it online. I'll talk a little smack, but I'm just going to pivot and go dance over here.
Well, and that's an interesting point. The knowledge shift you were talking, you were dragging me through my past because
Right.
I come from a journalism graphics background where I was definitely a print designer. And I know when you say DPI 300 or if somebody would send you a logo
Right.
in a Word document, how that crushes your soul. So the knowledge was more about the formats and the fonts and the fundamentals of graphic design and output, the different resolutions where now resolutions are not the factor so much, and maybe it's more about the technology and the tools. Maybe the knowledge has shifted.
You just download your photos off of Shutterstock or off of Adobe. Like, you don't have to know anything about photography. I used to take pictures of bulldozers and then go do the clipping path around them and then put them in the brochure. And now you just download a bulldozer and you click the
Right.
magic wand and it outlines it for you. And you're like, wow, this is great.
Absolutely. Or you upload it to a website and it just swipes the background out for you. It's a whole different skill set for sure. I know exactly what you're talking about, taking that pen tool and tracing around in Photoshop and meticulously going around hair and
Clipping
fine
paths.
leaves. Yes, absolutely. And
Yeah.
now that's a bit of a thing of the past. So has the knowledge shifted to other things
Right.
that we
And
used
you,
to have to do are now kind of automated or simplified, where now the knowledge is on something else?
right. But I feel like some of the fundamentals and those steps that happened when I started out, and maybe you started out on the ground floor doing production work and doing grunt work. And I mean, let's just not split hairs and just use the words that fit best. We're doing grunt work. You were a production worker, and there was somebody above you and somebody above that person, and you answered to that person, and you did grueling hours and you did some of that stuff, but you learned. There's that learning, that mentor-mentee relationship, that stepped and kind of cadenced learning. I feel like that's kind of been lost. You mentioned something a second ago about your journalism background, which segues nicely into why I want to focus on EX and CX, organizational design and service design, and lots of discovery. The reason why I want to do all of that work is because I feel like a lot of the traditional UX stuff kind of went by the wayside and it got sucked up into UI and product design. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not going to be one of those people who cries about it online. I'll talk a little smack, but I'm just going to pivot and go dance over here because no matter what, I'm going to pay my bills and I'm going to do the kind of projects I want to do and I'm going to solve the kind of problems I want to solve and I'm going to garner a paycheck from it. And it doesn't really matter if I'm rich or not. I want to be happy, of course, like most people. I'm not willing to work for a whole lot of companies. The list of places I won't work is a lot longer now than it was when I was 25 or 30. The thing I wanted to mention to you about your journalism background is everybody's got a different opinion, but the reason why I'm starting to shift and pivot, and I've pivoted several times in my career, is I've determined from doing hundreds of websites, hundreds of apps, and having, a lot of trial and error and mistakes and learning failures, that the largest issue that occurs in large organizations and enterprises, it isn't your code and it isn't your buttons or your design systems. Yeah, those are issues and they need to be solved for. The biggest issue that I have seen, and the reason why most call centers blow up all of the time and are overburdened, is content is the biggest sorest spot. And now content managers, if they exist anymore, because they're getting rid of those people too, right? When you get something mailed to you and you get something in your inbox in your email, you get something texted, or you go online to read on one of 100 websites in a giant organization or an app, and all of the things describing a specific product or service are different. They're in a different language. Some are first person conversational. Yep. Some sound like they're old English. Heretofore we shall, and you're like, who wrote this? Like King Dingaling. It just sounds like it's from the Dark Ages, or it's robot talk, and it's not enough contractions. You read that stuff and you understand that, like, a lot of people over a certain age, but a lot of people who are like seniors and like our parents and older, they're just going to call in. They're going to go, you know what? I'm just going to pick up the phone. This doesn't make any sense. And what's really going on is it's a content issue that information architecture woes and microcopy woes, all of that is being left to content designers. And a lot of content designers just in the last 2 or 3 years got laid off, and they're like, what do I do? So now they're going into conversational design. They're trying to pivot, which is smart, but that's the reason why I'm excited about just staying in my lane, because I've done a lot of employee experience stuff, and I've done service design, and I love customer experience work and putting customers first and humans first. So I'm gonna go do that.
So let me dig a little deeper into that content problem. Is the
Okay.
problem the inconsistency across the channels or
Right.
something else?
You have each LOB might have its own designer or its own writer.
Yes.
And writers, if you're a journalism major, you know exactly what I'm about to say. There's a lot of different kind of writers.
Yeah.
There's
Oh,
people
yeah.
who are great at micro copy, short copy, long copy, people who understand journalism, people who understand Marcom ad speak, people who are AP style or a Chicago manual of style, or they understand the looseness and the chaos of like ad copy, and especially H1s. Trust me when I tell you, 9 times out of 10, when they hire someone who has a writing resume, they're people that just, wrote in high school or college, but they don't know anything about the zing and the zip of the advertising marketing, kind of like writing great taglines or keeping all of your navigation copy, 1 word or 2 words or all verbs or all nouns. Like they
Yes.
mix that stuff up. And as soon as I see that stuff, I'm like, okay, I don't know what kind of writer you are, but you're not a writer of digital copy of websites or microcopy,
Yeah.
right?
And to your point, it could be different departments, different lines of business, right? Have different writers, or the product owner is just writing, or they may not have a designated writer at all.
Right,
And so there you start to see those differences
right,
across those
right.
different products or touch points, right?
And that's all complexity. That's all cognitive load. You're stumping the user unintentionally. And so because that is to me the biggest problem that I see as far as digital is concerned, most of the time, well, now it's the lack of UX, those traditional UX skills. Those are the two biggest things that I see. I feel like those are important issues, but now that I know that, and now that I've used the law of first principles and I can't deduce it anymore, that's the problem most of
Yeah.
the time. I feel like a much larger problem is organizational design structures, who we are as a business, what kind of culture we're creating, because all problems that exist in the world are design problems, right? All of them are some form of design problem. Design itself is a cultural problem within organizations. And so understanding that culture, understanding power and influence and how power moves around. Power is never born and it never dies. It just transfers. It's energy. Understanding how that power works so that you can kind of surf it and navigate it and harness it is really important. And being able to map and understand stakeholders and understand what's driving them with regards to like incentives and compensation and things like that. Because one of the big things that's happening, and product is having a huge come to Jesus like right now too. Like for designers and researchers, it was the last 3 years. Right now, if you follow a lot of product people online, they're backpedaling, they're trying to figure out, like they're denouncing things that they were 100% proselytizing and pushing 2 years ago or a year ago. And a lot of people are starting to be apologists and saying things and writing things that lead me to believe that they're starting to understand that a lot of this stuff we bit off on and we're sold is a bunch of bunk.
Do you have an example of something
Yeah,
that
of course. Like most of the product first stuff, this notion that, first of all, design and engineers need a mediary who's really secretly their job foreman in the form of a PM. And that
yeah.
PM needs to be all knowing and all seeing and all powerful. And that all they need is empowerment, which is a Marty Kagan thing. And all they need is more power, and they need to be like a little mini CEO. This is all garbage. It doesn't work. It's junk. And we've been on that Kool-Aid since Eric Rice tried to tell everybody in the world we need to function like startups. And it just doesn't work. And it's okay to say it because it's true. We need to move on and we need to shift gears. And that's why I'm hopeful, and I'm a little bit different than some of my contemporaries. I believe we're in a state of flux. I believe we're in a state of transition. We have not landed here. Okay. So stop panicking. What's the British thing? Be calm and shut the
Carry
F
on.
up. Be calm and chillax. That's like something that my son would have said. You just need to realize that we're in a state of transition, and don't freak out, because there's no way we're staying here, and businesses are not dumb. And eventually C-suite is going to go, hey man, you blamed research for taking too long and you blamed designers for dragging their feet, but now we did what you wanted and everything is matrixed and everything is flat and it still isn't working. In fact, we think it's worse. And that's the truth. The truth is, after implementing all of these goofy product ideas, there has never been a worse time in history. Cory Doctorow came up with the term enshittification for a reason. It's because it's apropos for right now. Okay.
Tell me about that term.
It wouldn't have been a good term 20 years ago. It's great right now. And it's great right now because the thing is, all of these guys, when you listen to their words, they're all knocking off and borrowing from Deming. W. Edwards Deming, the dude who went over to Toyota and taught them all about lean and manufacturing. But if you go read all of the 14 tenets or 14 rules of whatever it is, I'm going to wrap it up in a second, but they're all about like breaking down silos. They're all about continuous improvement. They're all about iteration, about breaking down barriers, getting rid of goofy metrics for metrics' sake. That was one of his big things was, hey, if you incentivize certain stats, people are going to juke the stats, meaning they're going to fake things until they get that number so they get the reward. That's how humans are. The whole gist of it was about quality. It was about creating quality. And none of these people, none of them are talking about quality. And the reason is they can't, because what they're doing is they replace quality with speed, scale, velocity. They're using all these words that just mean we need to grow. What are you growing? A turd? You're growing a terrible, unusable piece of junk into a giant, unusable piece of junk. You're growing this small thing that's harming the consumer or harming your users or doing them wrong in some kind of way. And you've got all these black hat, dark pattern things happening. And so what are you really scaling? You're going from a little Death Star to a big one. And so I think that's where we all need to come full circle back to quality. Like, hey, let's make something that's of high quality. And the way that you make something of high quality is you empower designers and researchers. You empower them to do their job. Because what I hear when I listen to all these product folks talking is they're borrowing our language and they're selling it to technicals. They're, when they start saying, oh, we need to do continuous discovery. Thanks. You didn't invent that term. We've been talking about that for 30 years. Okay. In fact, I just told you how Deming was doing it 50 years ago. This idea that, oh, we need to talk to customers. Are you kidding? We need to do more ethnography. And they're selling this as if it's some newfangled idea. And all these product people and these technicals and these MBAs and these bean counters are drinking it up. They're like, oh my God, this is excellent. And they're regurgitating and repeating each other. And they're all clicking on this stuff. And I'm just sitting back and yawning and going, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah, everything old is new again, right?
It's new again. And they're renaming it. They're just renaming this stuff and selling it to them. And that's how you know it's BS, is because it's starting to take on like a toxic, boring religion. And I just think that whole product first stuff, it's had its time. It's time to put it to bed. It's gross. It doesn't work.
Check out all my interviews with industry leaders on BlatzChatz.